Beautiful snowy morning here, and I was looking for something. Often I'll listen to a podcast or audiobook as I drive to pick up my kiddo in the mornings, and I came across something that I'm finding very interesting. So the concept is that depression and the pain of depression is a developmental occurrence that happens genetically when we outgrow sort of like our meaning making, and we need to expand our meaning making in life. And this woman, Dr. Lisa Miller, is talking about it on this interview with Lewis Howe. I'll put it in the description. And their conversation's really interesting and reminded me of something very powerful that happened in my life about 10 years ago where I was raised super fundamentalist Christian. That was very important to me for the first 2.5 decades of my life. I was deeply in relationship with my understanding of God at that time. I had a deep connection with Jesus. I was, a person who spent time every morning praying and meditating and journaling. I was not a surface Christian, I wasn't doing it just for social reasons. I had a deep connection to the spiritual aspect of it and to the relationship with something outside of myself or deeply within myself. And when I was in college, I then was I was over the course of my life involved in very many missions opportunities, but in college I was a part of one that was later shut down as like a child abuse cult, and it was very traumatic for me, and I had significant PTSD for a number of years, and I wasn't able to go into any type of a religious setting because I would have flashbacks and then panic attacks. And so I cut off everything related to Christianity and spirituality. It was also coinciding with in the years after that, my coming out as queer, and so I wasn't really welcome in the church of my upbringing, and there were other Christian churches that were open and affirming to queer people, but I still had those flashbacks, and it had become pretty clear to me that I was not a person who was ever going to be able to wrap my head around the idea that there was only one way to be connected spiritually in this life. So I had just stopped doing anything spiritual. I cut myself completely off, and I did that for about 10 years. And 10 years into it, I was deeply depressed and suicidal, and I finally ended up at a therapist. I had been avoiding all therapists as well because I had a pretty traumatic experience in the psych hospital. And I ended up back in a therapist's office for marriage counseling because my marriage was really struggling. And the therapist said to me, it seems you're a deeply spiritual person, and I don't think you're going to be able to move forward psychologically, make any shifts in your psychological experience without bringing this spirituality part of you forward again. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm not doing Christianity, and the only other thing that really I'm connected to is Judaism, and you're not allowed to convert to Judaism. And she was like, I'm sorry? She happened to be Jewish. She happened to have a partner, a partner who had converted to Judaism when they got married. So she specifically knew you were able to convert to Judaism, but I had been told growing up that Christians can't convert to Judaism. Jews can convert to Christianity, but not Christianity. We're not Christians to Judaism. And she was like, "That's actually not true." And I was like, "Okay." Well, I also don't feel great about the idea of like, there's only one way and you have to believe in this certain God or do these certain things. And I don't want to convey that to my kid or be a part of something that does. And she's like, well, there's something called Reconstructionist Judaism, which is more about like finding meaning in the here and now through the concept of something bigger than ourselves, and you don't have to believe in God. And I was like, okay. So let me park. Okay. So I was like, okay, well, let me look it up. So I looked it up, and I was like, actually, that sounds really fascinating. And then I saw that there actually was a Reconstructionist synagogue in my town. So I went and met with the rabbi. I went with my partner at the time, and we had a really good, interesting conversation. And we just sort of continued to meet with him and started going as a family. And I really enjoyed the community, and I really loved the group singing, which is one of the primary things that I really missed about Christianity. I really enjoyed studying and learning, and being connected to spirituality again. And it grew in importance in my life, and it wasn't as much of a fit for my former partner. So that was not going to be the path for us together. But I decided to convert, and I went through 2.5 years of study with a rabbi, and converted. And for me, it was a very important bridge. And I like that this conversation with Lewis Howes, this woman, Dr. Miller, uses the term bridge. It was a bridge back to my spirituality. And now I consider myself both Jewish, but also very connected with all wisdom traditions. I really feel that they all are just different languages for the same thing. And my connection with something bigger than just my one experience is a primary aspect of my feeling connected to meaning, and is deeply connected to my experience of releasing depression, when I can understand that there is something that is enduring on a level that's not just about my one set of actions or behaviors or accomplishments. And I like how, they talk about in this conversation that depression, she calls it a developmental depression, is sort of like when you're outgrowing your experience and it pushes up against it and it like calls you, it won't leave anyone behind. And that was something that was such a vivid experience for me with my conversion to Judaism. I remember so clearly one of the first Friday evening services that I was in, there was a line that said like, God remembers you. And I felt so moved that despite everything that I have been through or had been through, that spirituality came back to find me. And I have described, when talking about the vagus nerve, that the vagus nerve has like a gravitational pull back to that experience of oneness, of connectedness, of safety, and oneness that's beyond the sort of threat, kill or be killed experience of being just in the physical world. And I really feel like the vagus nerve, in the way that it calls us through a dorsal, which is more like a depression, up to a sympathetic, which is like that fight flight, into the ventral, which gives us that interconnectedness with all beings, and that co-regulation, and that oneness that we find through so many spiritual teachings. So I feel like I really love that this woman is offering like a biologic explanation, because I really feel that in my experience through understanding the nervous system. And yeah, I just loved this explanation. It makes me think of a little what are those, hermit crab, and that the hermit crab is like outgrowing the shell, and that of course you would feel depressed, like you're like being smooshed inside that little shell. And that, I know Eckhart Tolle talks also about the pain body as like the messenger, and I feel like the nervous system also is the messenger. We have so many beautiful messengers in our life that come to offer us the opportunity to expand. And I also, in their conversation, Lewis talked about how there's a story of Jim Carrey talking about depression when you're depressed, that's like deep rest. And that deep rest allows you to notice where you're cramped or stuck or masked, or um, holding yourself back from the truth and the expansiveness of who you are. So I just wanted to share their conversation with you. I'll put it in the description. Lots of love.